Hey guys, it's Taku. I hope you're all doing well. We are hours out from the global premiere of Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0, and since Evangelion has such a large hold in my life, I definitely wanted to film a video like this, just a video recapping my thoughts on the previous rebuild installments before I see this final film. I got into Evangelion in 2015, and like a lot of people, it did forever change my life. I owe a lot of my thanks to the rebuild, actually. In fact, I distinctly remember as a kid walking through my local bookstore when we had it, and I saw the Evangelion logo just spelled out. I believe it was the DVD for Evangelion 2.0. And I remember being overly fascinated by what such a cryptic word could mean. I was very young, and I really didn't know what this was about, but it was something that much later I would stumble upon. Flash forward to 2014, 2015, as I really start getting into anime. And of course, Evangelion is sort of the rite of passage anime for a lot of people. Even if you don't watch the whole thing, you usually try it. And so, of course, I sat down, set off a weekend, and I watched it. And just like that, I fell in love, and I watched the series, I watched the end of Evangelion, I watched Death and Rebirth, and I watched the Rebuild movies. This very lovingly coincided with the Funimation release of 3.0, and so I was able to watch 1.0, 2.0, and very shortly after 3.0. So my wait for 3.0 was not as long as everyone else's, maybe just a couple months. So I can't even imagine how people who have been sticking around with this series since the 90s have been, waiting for this final film, unless, of course, many of them have probably dropped off. I had just finished my rewatch of the Evangelion rebuild. I have all of my DVDs here. I've gotten my use out of them. So much use. They're a wonderful little set of films, a great fascination for the mind. And I just wanted to sit here and talk about each one. None of this is scripted. So let's start with that first one. Evangelion 1.0, You Are Not Alone, is a film that I treat now as my comfort film. I think it's very weird for anyone to almost say that Evangelion is a comfort for them, but it really does strike the right chords when it needs to. And I really like this first one, I think because you don't have the full ensemble present yet. You have Shinji, you have Misato, you have Rei, you have Ritsuko, and it's pretty much those four that carry the weight of this first film. Upon this latest rewatch, I find myself, unsurprisingly, with very little to say about the film, little to add that is new. This has easily got to be my most rewatched movie of every single anime or live action movie I've ever seen. I watch this all the time, more than annually. And so when I see this now, I think many of the things that surprise people, I feel very dead to, but dead again in a loving way. This film is the prelude film for the Rebuild series. This is based off of the Japanese model of theater in which you have the prelude that kicks off the events of the story, introduces a lot of the characters. Dare I say, doesn't do anything too exciting because if you kick off with the climax, you have little to follow up with, or at least it's going to be very hard to do that. But I find that this film is still very exciting, even though it was produced in, I believe, 2006. It is just gorgeous to look at. It is a fantastic film that has used CG in a way that has preserved it for over a decade after its release. I think that is an attest to the staying power and perhaps one of the goals that I know that Ono mentions with rebuilding this franchise. It's not only to rewrite the story or to share it with people, but it is also to present Evangelion in a way that it will hold from a visual standpoint for so many more years. I still think Neon Genesis is a beautiful series to look at, but the rebuild is definitely something else. You cannot doubt that the rebuild of Evangelion in its complete even looks better than a lot of anime movies produced today. And so that is just a test to the staying power of this film. I do think that Evangelion 1.0, now after seeing it so many times, is a bit slow. I remember watching this with my family a couple years back, and maybe it was just the environment of being with them, but the movie really felt like there was, not enough motion, that there was very little music, that it was not as exciting as it could have been, or at least as solid as 2.0 is in terms of entertainment. But again, I think that was just maybe the day I was feeling, because the latest rewatch cements the idea that this movie still has lots to offer. It is exciting in its own way, and the way that it builds up to a traditional climax with Shinji holding the positron cannon faced at the sixth angel. It is a wonderful scene that really posits the idea that Shinji, when he is with other people, when he has, the nation of Japan backing him, as everyone at Nerve, he is firing on all cylinders, quite literally, and it shows that he can do amazing things with the right people behind him. And it just reminds us that Shinji isn't alone, as the title says. Evangelion 2.0 You Cannot Advance is the break in the story. Anno makes the analogy to a railroad track, that if the prelude was everything leading up on the train ride, then the minute the track changes is when the break is indicated. And that is a lot of this film. This film feels very familiar to people who have watched the old series, but at the same time looks in a very new direction and quickly takes that direction and strikes out very far with it. I was talking to some friends and that they mentioned that this was their comfort film of the Evangelion sort of universe, and I would agree with a lot of that. This film has all of the characters, the comedy sort of returns back to the scene. I think if people remember that the original Evangelion, at least in its early parts, was actually quite funny at times, even if the humor was a bit dark or weird, and so this film really reinstates a lot of those old ideas that the series had. But again, it strikes out in a new direction. You have new angels, new Evangelion, new pilots even, and that is definitely exciting. This film keeps you entertained from the start to the finish. I think it has kind of an unpredictable trajectory in that each battle is going to be big, but it starts off quite large and gets even bigger until the very end, where there's no resolution to it. As a sequel to the first film, but a bridge between this and 3.0, Evangelion 2.0 is sort of your last look, your last little window, waving goodbye at you before departing on what the rebuild will stand for. At times it is funny, at times it is sad, at times it's anxious or frustrating. I still remember the first time I watched Asuka get into Evangelion Unit 3 instead of it being Toji, and that to me was the first indication, the first major break in the story. Yes, you have the whole introduction with Mari at the beginning, which I do think is exciting in itself. I myself do like kind of a car highway chase sort of thing, and that's what they're invoking with that opening scene. But there's a lot of body horror in this one that is missing from the first film. In fact, this film almost says if you've made it as far as 1.0 and you are departing on this second one, this is more of what Evangelion's about. While the first film has the traditional story of Evangelion down almost frame by frame, the second film has the character down far better, and I think that is why it still holds up as its own entertaining piece, and why people, even when they are going and rewatching this series of films, they'll sometimes stop at 2.0 just to give a sad little smile before what is to come. Evangelion 3.0 You Cannot Redo is perhaps one of the most frustrating anime experiences that I've ever had. Historically, it also has a track record with fans. It has ruined a lot of fans' interpretation of the rebuild if they had stuck around for the first two films, and I can understand why completely. It is a film that, for all intents and purposes, tosses out everything you knew about the original television series and really shows you something different. I say that as if the rebuild hasn't already been doing that from the first film, but really 3.0, when you skip 14 years and you've got everyone aged up, except of course the main pilots, and you are fighting some of your battles in space, it is really a jarring shift, but a thrilling one at that. I think that 3.0 is a must in the rebuild. It is the necessary evil that will help facilitate this transition to the final film. It is also important to keep 3.0 in mind from an artistic standpoint, because director Anno, if he just rebuilt the whole Evangelion television series and just did a remake of that, it's not very exciting. It might have been still very successful. In fact, it probably would have been, since the original property is so good and historical and it holds a lot of integrity. But this film, by tossing everyone into the far future and setting your robot battles in space, and everyone who you thought you knew so well about, it's not the world you thought you knew. This film is the easiest way for Anno to stray from the shadow of Evangelion. It took me a long time to realize that. I think a lot of people imagine that when a director like Ono envisions a series like this, that he's got it all planned out from the start. But clearly, after years of being on the project, off of it, trying something new, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of 3.0 came from just sort of a pipe dream one day. And this is the new what if. This is going to be the film. This is what's going to happen. These are the risks we're going to have to take. And then the payoff will have to come years later when we get that final film done. 1.0 is the prelude, 2.0 is the break, 3.0 is the it is the quickening, it is the thrilling, the build of anticipation, it is the minute right before the climax, and some dare say that it ends on one of the climaxes. Of course, if it weren't all for being a part of Gendo's plan, I would agree with them. Evangelion 3.0 is frustrating. It's got some things in it I don't necessarily love. I don't love Misato's attitude towards Shinji. I don't love Ritsuko's lack of appearance. I think she was such a present character in the first two. To kind of have her drop off the face of the earth in the third one that doesn't jive well with me. Asuka is back, badder than ever, and I think that is great. And then you also have Kaoru, and Kaoru is a signature part of this iconic series. He's an iconic character, and I'm so glad that 3.0 does him so well. But if I had to sit on 3.0's ending for another couple years even, I would be incredibly depressed and deterred from recommending the rebuild to people. The ending is full of emotional catharsis in the way that you have no idea what will happen next. Eva has exhausted its characters, killed some of them off even, and anticipation that is left for what will be the final film is really just speculation, just years and years of speculation until now. When I look back on these films in their totality, Evangelion 1.0 is the comfort film for me. It is the most familiar because it does pretty much nothing new. And I think that is fine, because what it does bring to the table is a new vision of Evangelion, with visuals and a flow that is much more better and dynamic and trimmed down than those first 6 episodes of the television series. Evangelion 2.0 then is the spirit of Evangelion for me. It captures the whimsy of it, it captures the flirtatious elements of it, while also maintaining the high-octane action and conspiracy. And then Evangelion 3.0 is the art film. This is the art house film from Hideki Anno. These are raw emotions shot on CinemaScope in that perfect HD vision that Evangelion can be both shocking but also incredibly sad. And that is why that of these 3 films, I think the one that I come back to a lot is 3.0. And I'm hoping that I am going to be able to look at 3.0 in a much better light after having seen Evangelion 3.0+1.0 Thrice Upon a Time. My hopes for Thrice Upon a Time is that it addresses at least some of the 14-year time gap. I've already seen an article of Anno talking about the success of 3.0+1.0 and continuing Evangelion, and he says that pretty much he's done with the end, where Thrice Upon a Time ends. He doesn't want to continue, but he would like to maybe someday revisit that time gap. And so just knowing that already is there kind of irks me in a way. I hear that the film answers a lot of the questions, a lot of the dying questions that people have been having about these 3 mystifying films, if you will. But in terms of other plot things, I do hope the number of angels and number of Evas is addressed. I think there's sort of a weird clash. I don't know why we skip angel numbers. I don't know why we skip Eva numbers. And so I hope that also gets addressed. Hope the mystery of the Wunder gets solved, because just its presence in 3.0 really stresses me out for no reason. And I hope that they explain what it is, what it's capable of doing, and judging by the previews, I think we'll get a lot of that. I also hope for Asuka to elaborate on some of the curse of the Eva. What is it like to be a pilot, and why they don't age. Of course, you also have the mystery of Mari. Who is she? What is she doing in this series? Well, why has she robbed some of our characters, beloved characters' screen time, and instead replaced her with her presence? I like Mari. I think she's a fun character. I think she's also what the rebuild needed, just to stray from the originals, just to add another pilot. And I think that her presence in this film is going to pay off really, really well. And if it didn't need to be said already, I hope for the emotional resolution of all of our characters, most especially Shinji and Misato. The rebuild really makes strides to paint those two characters in different lights than they did before. Misato is a lot more hopeful and optimistic until you get to 3.0, where she is striking out into different emotional territory. And Shinji is, well, he is still very complicated, but he is making heroic strides in his own way. My hopes for Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 Thrice Upon a Time are high, and I hope that the whole world will be able to rejoice when the thing is just over. I mean it in the most humbling way when I am excited to see Evangelion come to an end. If you've stuck around to the end of this video, thank you so much. You had no reason to, unless you wanted to hear just one fan's thoughts on Evangelion, their hopes and dreams for this final film. If you've got any thoughts on your own, though, let me know down in the comments. Please, I love to hear from more Evangelion fans. Again, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll be back probably to open up some of those theater goodies that came a while back. I opened the Evangelion 3.0 plus 1.0 theater stuff, but I said I would time capsule it until we got the film, and hey, that's today. Alrighty guys, I enjoyed filming this video. I'm glad I sat down and finally got to talk about these films in this long, kind of uncensored, unfiltered vlog style video. So thank you again, and till next time.